Welcome to the deep dive. So when you think about these massive global companies, flag carriers like Korean Air, you just assume their security is a digital fortress.
Right, you picture these state-of-the-art defenses, ironclad perimeters, and look, they often do have that.
But the sources we dug into for this deep dive, they tell, a much more common story.
A very common story. It's that the front door isn't where the criminals are getting in anymore.
Exactly. So Korean Air, South Korea's biggest international airline, we're talking over 23 million passengers last year alone, they had to disclose a pretty big data incident.
Yeah, about 30,000 employees. But the real question, the one that makes this so interesting, was how? How did they get in?
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to trace this attack all the way back to the true point of failure.
Which was a critical third-party supplier. We'll look at the data that was leaked, the company's response, and then we're going to get into the really fascinating part, the threat actor behind it all. This is a group that specializes in exactly this kind of weakness.
So if you're trying to really understand modern risk, this is a perfect case study. It's all about the long tail of data after a company restructures and, frankly, the sheer scale of what they call big game hunting ransomware.
Let's jump in.
Okay, so let's unpack the basics. Korean Air puts out this disclosure on December 29, 2025. At first glance, it looks like a direct hit on the airline.
It does, but it was anything but direct. The vulnerability wasn't even on their main network.
So where was it? Who were the immediate victims?
The victims were Korean Air employees, about 30,000 of them, but the hackers, they didn't get into the airline servers. They hit a completely different company.
And that was?
Korean Air Catering and Duty Free, KC&D for short.
KC&D. Okay, that name suggests it's, still pretty close to the main company, maybe a subsidiary. Why are they holding employee data?
Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. KC&D was an internal part of Korean Air. It handled all the catering, duty-free logistics. So, of course, it had employee information on its ERP server, its Enterprise Resource Planning System.
Right, that makes sense.
But, and this is a crucial part, KC&D was spun off. It was sold in 2020.
Like 5 years ago.
5 years ago. It's a completely separate company now, an external partner. But the data for current Korean Air staff, it just stayed there.
It was left behind on that legacy server.
Exactly. That data was still sitting on KC&D's system. So the airline sells the business, but the risk never left.
That is just, it's a perfect example of digital loose ends. I mean,
Yeah.
You can imagine how complex and expensive it must be to migrate all that legacy IT during a spin-off. Maybe it was just easier to leave it.
Or it was an oversight. It's often cheaper in the short term, to just let these systems keep running. But that creates this long tail of risk. You're now completely dependent on the security of a company you don't even control anymore.
But there is one piece of good news here, especially for anyone who flies with them.
A huge piece of good news.
Korean Air was very, very clear that no customer data appears to have been compromised.
Right. And that's key. So your booking records, your frequent flyer info, payment details, all of that seems to have been secure. The breach was limited to this internal HR-related data.
So let's get specific about that data. For these 30,000 employees, what did the hackers actually get?
It was two things specifically: employee names and their account numbers.
Okay, so not social security numbers or credit cards, but names and account numbers. That still feels dangerous.
It's very dangerous. It's the perfect raw material for a really sophisticated follow-up attack.
You mean social engineering?
Exactly. It's not about stealing money right away. It's about establishing trust. If a scammer calls or emails an employee with their correct name and internal account number, pretending to be from HR or IT.
They sound completely legitimate.
Completely. And that's how they get you to give up more sensitive credentials. That's the real goal.
Okay, so what about Korean Air's response? They sent out internal notices, reported it to the authorities, the standard stuff. What was their long-term promise?
Well, their official stance was a full security review with all of their partners, which, they have to say. But I think the real gravity of it came from their vice chairman, Woo Ki-hong.
And what did he say?
He said the company takes this matter very seriously and that they were focusing all efforts on the scope, even though it came from an external partner company that was sold off.
That language is really important. Sold off.
It's a direct admission. They're saying, look, we know we don't own them anymore, but the responsibility is still ours. The risk is still ours.
I have to say, if I were an employee there, that might be a little frustrating to hear.
I'm sure it is.
Because reviewing protocols now is great, but the failure was 5 years ago? This whole thing just screams oversight.
It absolutely does. This is a textbook case of IT debt, but the reason they're having to play catch up now is because of who hit them.
And this is where the whole story shifts, right? Away from corporate responsibility and into the world of pure cybercrime. We need to talk about the group that claimed responsibility.
Yes. The group is called Clop. Sometimes you'll see it spelled CL0P. They are an incredibly successful Russian-speaking ransomware as a service operation.
And they took credit for this.
Oh, yeah. They claimed the KC&D attack back in November, even before the airline's official disclosure, and they leaked the employee data on their Tor site to prove it.
Okay, let's pause there. Ransomware as a service. Can you break down what that actually means?
Sure, think of it like a franchise model for criminals. The core Clop group develops all the sophisticated tools, the malware, the exploits. Then they license that entire toolkit out to other hackers who they call affiliates.
So the affiliates carry out the attacks.
The affiliates do the dirty work, and Clop takes a significant cut of every successful ransom payment. It's a hyper-efficient way to scale a criminal enterprise.
Which explains why their name is everywhere. And the sources say they specialize in big game hunting.
It means they don't waste time on small targets. They're going after huge organizations with deep pockets and a desperate need to get back online. Think hospitals, infrastructure, global airlines.
And the ransoms are.
In the tens of millions.
They've been around for a while, too. I think the sources trace them back to at least 2014 from another group called TA505.
That's right. They are veterans. And there's a really important geopolitical detail here that you see with a lot of these Russia-based groups.
You're talking about the targeting exclusion.
Exactly. Clop's malware is designed to not activate on any system that's set to the Russian language or located in a former Soviet country. It's a deliberate tactic to avoid drawing attention from their local law enforcement.
So they have a business model, political safeguard. What about their technical skill? The forces mentioned they use 0 days.
Their skill is top tier. A 0 day, for anyone who doesn't know, is a software vulnerability that the maker of the software doesn't even know exists yet. There's no patch for it.
So you're completely defenseless.
You are. And Clop is notorious for finding and weaponizing these 0 days in widely used third-party software to get their initial access. They are masters of infiltration.
And that focus on third-party software. That really is the key to all this.
It's their entire model. The KC&D breach wasn't some random attack. It fits their playbook perfectly. Find one weak link that hundreds of other bigger companies rely on.
Right. It's like a high-yield investment for them. Why hack one company when you can find a single flaw and compromise an entire supply chain?
Exactly. And to understand how big of a threat they are, you just have to look at what they're doing right now.
So what's their current campaign?
The sources say they are actively exploiting a critical 0 day in Oracle EBS.
Oracle e-business suite, another massive corporate system, just like the one KC&D was using.
A huge one. And the list of organizations being hit by this one flaw is just staggering. We're talking about Envoy Air, Harvard University, the Washington Post, Logitech.
Wow. An airline, a university, a news organization, a tech company, all from one vulnerability.
All from one shared, flawed piece of infrastructure. And they perfected this mass exploitation tactic on a specific type of software.
Managed File Transfer Solutions, right? MFT.
Yes, MFT. These are the tools that big companies use to securely share huge, sensitive files with partners and customers.
So they're like the trusted digital armored trucks moving data between companies.
Perfect analogy. And Clop found ways to hijack the trucks. Their biggest campaign ever was in 2023, targeting a product called Movi Transfer.
I remember that. It was everywhere.
It was one of the largest ransomware campaigns in history. Hundreds of companies hit worldwide. And that wasn't even their only one that year.
Right, there was another one.
Earlier in 2023, they hit Go Anywhere MFT, a competitor, and compromised over 130 organizations. And they pioneered this whole model back in 2020 and 2021 by hitting a tool called Excellion FTA.
That consistency is terrifying. They aren't targeting companies, they're targeting categories of software.
And that's the critical insight. The KC&D breach wasn't some vendetta against Korean Air. Korean Air was just collateral damage because its former partner was using a system that fit Clop's target profile.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. We went from an airline to a catering company to a massive Russian cybercrime syndicate. What does this all mean for you, for the person listening, who has to manage digital risk?
I think this incident really highlights two huge modern security trends that you just can't separate.
Go on.
First, it's the supply chain weak link. Clop is smart. They know that vendors, the software providers, the caterers, they often have smaller security budgets than the giant corporations they serve, so they hit the weakest link to get to the main prize.
And the second trend is what we saw play out over 5 years.
Right. The persistence of data. Selling off a business unit doesn't make the risk disappear. If that legacy data still has value, like the personal info of 30,000 employees, someone will come for it, no matter whose server it's technically on.
And that is the lesson here for you. You have to vet every single link in your digital chain, not just your own. I mean, a global airline was made vulnerable because of data held by a caterer it hadn't owned for half a decade. You really are only as secure as your weakest partner.
Past or present.
So to recap everything, 30,000 Korean Air employees were affected. The hackers got in through KC&D, the spun-off partner company, because of legacy data left on an old ERP server. And the attacker was Clop, the Races group famous for huge supply chain attacks like Moviat.
That's the landscape. And that brings us to our final thought. The airline industry spends billions on physical security. It's intense, right? Baggage screening, cockpit doors, everything is locked down.
Of course.
And yet this massive breach happened through a purely digital vulnerability in old HR data on a server owned by a company they sold 5 years ago.
It really puts things in perspective.
It does, and it raises a really profound question for every single business out there. How long are you digitally and legally responsible for data that you transferred to a third party years ago? Because that shadow of legacy risk, it's proving to be much, much longer than anyone ever thought.
Something critical for you to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.